The Bay Harbor Butcher versus the man behind the slaughter. Two of some of the most infamous serial killers in modern times. Or at least modern in, well, gaming sense, for lack of a better word. And media sense, I guess, to be more specific. But when it comes down to who would win in a fight, who would win? And not only who would win in a fight, but could Dexter solve the case of William Afton and bring him in, put him on his table even? Not only in a more power perspective, but in a more lore perspective too, more comparing their IQ stats as well. To make it more fair, this will be William before he was springlock, before it became like a super powered animatronic filled with like remnant, as this did in fact give him a stat amp. And I don't think most people would disagree when I say that like Springtrap is going to physically manhandle Dexter when it comes to power. However, other things like his IQ and such shouldn't be decreased, neither should really his like mental stuff, so we can still use that. We will be using Dexter from the show, and he will be given all of his equipment, and we will be using William from the games and the novels, as the novels are canon. And as I mentioned before, we'll be comparing a straight up fight, or in two, could Dexter solve the case and put him in jail, aka who is smarter? Could Dexter get William on the table, to put it simply? Let's cover William Afton. Even in his normal human form, he is described to have outright inhuman strength, tossing around trained officers like children, and even breaking windpipes in the novel, in which who he does this to is Elizabeth, a robot who is so strong she can bust down doors and snap other people's necks. But by far, William Afton's best feat is beating the OG4 animatronics, which is confirmed he simply overpowered them, not dismantling or using a weapon, which is more headcanon and assumptuous. And we know this is consistent as Funtime Freddy should be technologically superior to the OGs, yet even in the novels when he is weakened, he can overpower Funtime Freddy like nothing, even though Funtime Freddy is a character superior to the OGs. With the OGs being so powerful in the Week Before novel that they redirect the entire building's power of the Fnaf 1 building to themselves to store and use it to amplify themselves in the book. This is a building level feat based on calculations that is consistent, with the Twisted Ones taking a large gasoline explosion, getting into the small building plus ranges of power, which these guys just get torn apart by the OGs quite easily. Meaning even William in this state would range from the small buildings to building tiers of power, funnily enough, but more likely small building is more consistent. For speed, not only is Afton but the OGs in Funtime, who she should upscale consistently, able to perception blitz normal humans, landing in that subsonic tiers of speed, with maybe some supersonic stuff with taking the novel statements and how Bonnie can react to rifles and such, or even how maybe higher with how Puppet can react to lightning or is compared to it and mimic being nanoseconds, though not should only the base William not scale to this. Even the supersonic stuff is a little vague and iffy, all things considered. So we'll cap him at subsonic with potential for supersonic speeds. He has no real notable hacks in him at the moment. He does have remnant, as in he can extract it, and he can control technology, though he isn't technically immortal by this point, as he did not fuse the suit and become purely infused with as much remnant as he did, nor can he create the phantoms like he does within the suit. All that stuff. He's strong, but he's mostly just a normal human with maybe a knife, I guess, and an axe, depending on what you want to take. But most likely he did it barehanded or just a knife, which either way, those weapons would be standard equipment anyway, so it's really not that big of a deal. But let's move on to the Bay Harbor Butcher. Dexter AP-wise would range from the street to wall ranges of power, with being able to snap necks, cut characters in half, according to himself, or even crush skulls, according to what he says. Though I guess you can argue the fact that this is a little vague, and maybe, since we don't see it, maybe he doesn't actually do it, but I think it's fine. It's pretty consistent as well. He can even slam people through wooden walls and slam through them himself, which should be around those wall level ranges of powers, and considering he fights up amped up, roided up humans who can take down several trained officers at once, who should be superhuman, meaning we can upscale them off of real life humans' feats who also get in those street level ranges, even just from like the peak humans that exist in our real world. And this guy's taking out like several trained officers who, while Dexter can beat them up, this would be consistent for Dexter, who's mostly more of a normal human than William Afton is, definitely, even before the suit, being shockingly in those street tier 2 wall level ranges of power. A higher end that people often bring up is the explosion feat in the water. While I definitely do agree with the fact, well, with this feat, people claiming, which should, if Dexter takes the full force of the explosion, ranging from building to multi-city block levels of power, depending on the multipliers for such, considering people often argue that Dexter was weakened at the time. Which, ignoring the fact there really is no confirmed multiplier, the problem is shockingly not the fact that Dexter could have swam away. That's not the problem I have with this. I do agree with the fact that it might be a little weird to assume he swam away in such a quick amount of time. The problem is, Dexter is underwater at the time, and water actually reduces the pressure of explosions. The pressure that Dexter would be taking at the very least, meaning Dexter, by being under the water, is inherently getting protected by it, and that is the excuse for why this mostly normal person is able to survive this big-ass explosion. And even just visually, you could just say it's an outlier, I guess. But I think the fact that we can just say the water would reduce the pressure of the explosion inflicted onto Dexter is just meaning that he's experiencing a greatly reduced effect of the explosion, if any major at all, then that should just kind of prove the point that he really shouldn't scale to such a feat. For speed, he should range in those peak to superhuman ranges to potentially sub to supersonic. He's able to catch up to slow vehicles and outpace normal humans and even peak ones. There is sometimes when he debatably perceives or dodges or reacts to bullets, though you can either say his aim dodging or more so his perception than anything, so I'll purely leave that up to interpretation, with Dexter being extremely skilled when it comes to hand-to-hand, even knowing pressure points, and has syringes that can knock out elephants, more or less normal people. So in a pure fight sense, who wins? Well, the problem here is, while Dexter is much more skilled than Afton, and syringes that can potentially knock William out, the problem is that William is simply so much stronger and more durable and most likely faster. His speedheads are much more consistent than Dexter's, who are very debatable, and he's obviously much stronger. Dexter has never torn apart robots who can survive these small building level explosions or endure small building to building levels of energy being absorbed within them, when Dexter's best feat is like contending wall-level superhumans and breaking through wooden walls. There's a very clear difference in power that cannot be ignored when it comes to a straight fight. William would just simply overpower Dexter and probably be much faster than he can do. The only feasible win con you could argue is essentially the fact that Dexter could get a lucky hit with the syringes, but once again, William would be beating Dexter to a pulp, and William would be too fast, so Dexter probably couldn't even land the hit anyways. So, when it comes to, as I just said, a normal fight, just throwing hands, William would be pretty much far superior. But what about in terms of intelligence? If Dexter was sent out to track the case of what happened at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the 5 missing kids and such, or probably more missing kids actually, would he find it? Something to note is that there is several forms of intelligence, and I think a lot of people ignore that to a heavy degree, as people assume when talking about intelligence and such, that, oh, this character has a higher IQ, so they're smarter in every scenario. No, that's not how IQ works. In fact, IQ is actually a very bad way to determine overall intelligence. Overall intelligence is something that is determined by a lot of factors, hence why a lot of people are smart in one aspect of something, but maybe lesser in another. And hence why also a lot of the smartest and richest people in the world don't necessarily have the highest IQs ever. And why the people with the highest IQs in the world aren't necessarily the smartest or the richest people either. And overall intelligence is based off many, many factors of intelligence, and a lot of them surprisingly don't matter in the context of investigating a killer. So while Dexter is a lot more experienced when it comes to hand-to-hand and pressure points and martial arts, and while William is a lot more smarter when it comes to understanding technology and crafting and building things, maybe even understanding more abstract concepts, considering he could mess with Remnant, which is a more like abstract soul-based idea. When it comes to who would, if Dexter could find the other, a lot of those intelligence categories and those minor categories that they hold over each other don't matter too much. What does matter is the context of both of their stories and how both are presented in terms of the intelligence. How William is presented compared in his universe with how he is a killer and how he can avoid the police and such, and how Dexter is presented in his universe with how he can track people down and how skilled he is at that. So obviously we know that even Scott himself says William is smart, cunning, and manipulative. He is shown very manipulative and can manipulate people at a lot of times. That's how he didn't get caught. He evaded the police in his universe because he was so manipulative and they didn't have enough evidence to track him down. However, what we do know is that the novel specifies that the police knew exactly it was William who killed the kids. The problem is it was more of a evidence-based thing, as he just left before they could find any meaningful evidence, and he cleared out any evidence that would make him look guilty. And comparing this to Dexter, who is a character who can outsmart the entire FBI, more or less a local police station in a small, remote town, including their own genius detectives such as Lundy, and somehow convinced everyone he was dead for 10 years. Even having unnatural intuition when it comes to suspecting killers, instantly figuring out notable killers like the Tooth Fairy, and connecting seemingly unrelated killings to serial killers, there's no reason that Dexter couldn't figure out it was William. He'd probably have to bring him in illegally, which is something Dexter does anyways, and just does it anyways, so it doesn't really matter from a more legal standpoint. But either way, Dexter's gonna figure out it's William Afton pretty easily. Once again, the police in a small, very, very remote location could figure out it was William and just didn't have enough evidence. While Dexter is outsmarting the FBI with genius detectives, and then just has an unnatural intuition on killers and other notable killers who fit the bill exactly like William. And I also think Dexter would very quickly find the bodies in the suits. The very obvious, as soon as he does an investigation, he's gonna see the smell, open the suits, and find the bodies. I actually don't know how the hell the police didn't find the bodies in the suits actually and didn't notice off of the smell. But I think it's more of a plot convenience thing anyways. But Dexter is once again easily finding William without a doubt, and could probably just illegally break him in. Well, and obviously not beat him to death or anything, but he could figure it out was William and track him down pretty easily. William's smart for his universe, but Dexter is like filled with geniuses, and then Dexter is like the genius of those geniuses at this kind of shit, specifically at solving murders and crimes like this. And obviously, while Dexter can't like overpower William and maybe like understand the higher technology that he's using, he once again should still be able to figure out it was William pretty easily. So in conclusion, I think, well, in a straight fight, if you put them in a ring, or if they were forced to fight somehow, like just purely hand to hand, then I think William is winning. Though I think in a sense of who could track down the other, I think, or could Dexter track down William, I think the answer is very evidently Dexter is tracking down William extremely easily and figuring out who he is without much issue. So I hope you liked the video. Thank you. Please like, subscribe, and share the video, and join the Discord server. I apologize for the lackluster mic in this video. I am not only sick, I broke my other mic, or someone else broke my other mic. I don't even know how it was broken, but the other mic is sadly broken, and I gotta get it repaired. So hopefully I can get back to that mic sooner than later, but peace.